This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts?
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is a new episode of Old Man Strength. I am your host tonight, Chris Shipley. My co-host, Tim Johnson, is out tonight. He's got a family event with his daughter, so we called in the troops, so to speak, and brought on our co-host from Hawk's Eye View. I won't hold that against him, Drew Shipley. And Drew, let's just get this out of the way right now. We'll play this.
You twin?
No, we are not relations.
No, we are not related.
Twin?
Everybody asks us. We are not related. Drew, how are you tonight?
I'm great, Chris. It's nice to get a little Cy-Hawk vibe here on Old Man Strength tonight, so I'm pretty excited. How you feeling about your Cyclones, Chris?
I was feeling great until that lineman started running his mouth at the press conference today, giving them all kinds of bulletin board material. Talking about how it's a night game and they don't know what they're coming in for and everything else. Hey, you know what, dude? Shut your mouth. Let's not get them all riled up. We don't need to get them all upset. And that's just, we don't need to do that.
You know, the crappy thing about it, Chris, is like the weather for Ames on Saturday is actually projected to be pretty nice considering for mid-November, right? So
yeah, like 60 degrees. And I know I would have... I'm 50-50 on that, too. I would have preferred, blowing snow and everything else, but I didn't want to sit through that. And frankly, last year, I sat through that at the Texas Tech game, and that didn't help us. So yeah. All I did was just freeze to death. So, and on a side note, too, Drew, happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it was a good weekend, a nice little long weekend out here in D.C.
I bet. Well, nobody's tuning in to listen to us, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest as she sits there awkwardly listening to us banter back and forth. But I'm extremely privileged and honored that she agreed to come on. Calyn Thompson, WHO13 morning anchor. I appreciate you staying up late so you can come on with us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And just to echo, happy Veterans Day to Drew. And I also thought you two might be related when I saw the last names, but glad we got that cleared up.
You know, Calyn, it's not exactly like the last name of a Smith or
right?
Johnson,
Thompson, yeah.
Chris is actually the second Shipley family that I know of no relation whatsoever. I believe there's some Marshalltown folks.
Yep.
Okay.
I believe some Ottumwa, Oskaloosa, Southern Iowa folks as well. So
sure.
I'm not 100% sure how many of us there are, but there's more than I thought.
Interesting. Okay.
And from what I've been told, and I don't know, my dad was kind of a storyteller, so I don't know how accurate this is, but apparently before the Civil War, Shipley was a fairly popular name from the South, and several of that obviously died in the Civil War. I'm going to go with that because apparently there's a very popular donut chain down there called Shipley, so that's what I'm going with. That's my claim to fame. So, I once got asked on a phone call when I worked at Wells Fargo if I had ever heard of Shipley's Donuts, and I said no, but I eat a lot of donuts, so that's close enough. So,
I like it.
Kate, go ahead, Drew.
No, I'm good. I like it. There's actually one random Shipley Donuts up here in East Maryland. That it's kind of weird because it is mainly a Texas chain, and there's a few places in Arkansas and Louisiana, I believe, that also have Shipley Donuts. But we have one store in the entire state of Maryland. It's about 45 minutes away. And I have yet to be there, so I'm going there soon. I need to.
I mean, I would make a special trip. From what I saw when I was in Texas, it's kind of like the Walmart of donut shops.
Chris, you just don't like Texas. Let's just face it.
That's right. I got all kinds of Texas heat. All right. So, Calyn, appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell? I give you a brief review, but why don't you tell our listeners more about Calyn Thompson?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I'm the morning anchor for Today in Iowa on WHO13 News. I started there back in November of 2020. So my work anniversary is coming up on the 16th, actually. So just a couple of days. It'll mark 3 years. I grew up watching Channel 13 because I grew up in Norwalk, Iowa. Was born in Des Moines. So go Warriors. I'm an alumni from Norwalk. And then after high school, went on to Wartburg College to study broadcast journalism. I loved going to school up there in Waverly. My first job when I graduated college was up in Rochester, Minnesota. It was a CBS affiliate, KIMT News 3, and it was like a split coverage area of North Iowa and Southern Minnesota. So that was a really good, you call them stepping stone to kind of get your experience, learned a lot, met some great people. But my goal was to always come back home, and I met that goal. So I'm happy to be here.
Great. That's super great. That's kind of where we wanted to start. You grew up in Norwalk.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about what it was like growing up in a small town. Norwalk is, believe it or not, has that small town feel, but it's so close to everything. Kind of tell me, what was it like growing up in that small town and how it shaped you?
Absolutely. I'm really glad I went when I did. I feel like it's getting really big, but it will always kind of have that small town charm to me. I grew up there where everyone kind of knew everyone, a small enough grade where I knew everyone who walked across a graduation stage, which I really liked. I was really active within school and growing up, played sports, volleyball, softball, basketball, ran track a couple years just to stay in shape, but was not very fast. Was in music, choir, show choir, did band in middle school. I don't know. I just really liked staying busy. I had an older brother, so that was fun. He was just 3 years older than me. So we were close enough in age where we got along and still could support each other throughout our school activities. My parents worked in Des Moines. My mom is a labor and delivery nurse, and my dad is in the military. He worked at the Iowa Air National Guard. Yeah, based at the Des Moines Airport. So he had just retired last year. So he's kind of transitioning to that retired life. But
so he's driving your mom nuts is basically what he's doing.
He is, honestly. That's going to transition more for her, I think, than him.
I'll bet.
Oh, man. So that's been kind of an interesting watch. But no, I'm really proud of where I come from. And it was a really supportive community and still is. And I just proud to be a Norwalk Warrior, proud to be a Wartburg Knight, and it feels good to be back home in Des Moines. Des Moines is definitely home.
I'll bet. Calyn was also ran track and was in show choir. She was a big show choir. So I spent many a Saturdays in a random gym trying to watch the Iowa State Cyclone basketball game on my phone while I was waiting for her 5-minute stint on the stage.
Supportive dad.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. You bet.
It is a lot of hurry up and wait and sit around and wait. But it was my dad who said, like, out of all the activities I ever did growing up, show choir was his favorite. I don't know why. Maybe just music is the universal language. And so that's what he enjoyed the most.
I do look back and miss it. But yeah, it was always fun. I didn't miss the track meets, mostly because Calyn threw shot put and then ran the very last race of the thing. So there was no getting out of there.
Yeah, you were there for the
I was
long
there at
haul.
the beginning and I was there at the end. So
4x4, right? That's the last one.
Yeah,
yep. Oh yeah.
Luckily, by her senior year, she quit that. So she was just throwing shot and discus.
There you go.
You bring up a good point, Chris, of sitting around and waiting. It's kind of a military thing too, but like literally like the arts and stuff, you get your like 10, 11-minute window and you wait there all day to see that. And then what takes so long to get your ratings? Why does it take like an hour and a half to find out you got a 1 or a 1+ on your trumpet solo? Like, what are we doing here?
I don't know what it's. I guess there's a method to the madness of the judging or the critique, and I know they write a lot of notes, but I guess that's a good point. I don't know why it takes so long.
I mean, I guess you get the best in show rating, right? So you have to wait to see
Like
everybody.
everyone,
I guess that kind of makes sense, but like there is a lot of sitting around waiting.
Definitely, no, for sure.
It's a racket too, because then if you make finals, then you got to go back outside and you got to pay to get back in. So that was always a racket too. And usually Caitlin's squad usually made finals. And then, of course, so then I couldn't get out of there early. And the Sioux City show was absolutely the worst because that was clear in Sioux City. So we ended up, the last 2 years, we ended up just getting a hotel room because it was better to just stay there than to drive home.
That's smart. We did competition once at like Bishop Heelan.
Yes.
Oh, that was a track.
Yeah, and that gym is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So
my senior year, we played Sioux City Heelan in football to a 4 overtime game.
Oh my gosh!
Obviously Friday night. We did not roll back into Newton. I grew up in Newton, Calyn. So Newton and Norwalk are now newer rivals, right?
Oh yeah, we played Newton all the time growing up.
Okay. Yep. And I think 4:30 in the morning we rolled into Newton. That was. They still made us come in and do weight training at like 10 o'clock. It's like, what are we doing here?
Oh, that's brutal.
We won the game in 4 overtimes, and it was like no reward. What's up with Victory Saturdays? That didn't happen.
I guess not. Wait, so how do you say where you're from?
Newton.
Okay, you do the T. So growing up, my dad would be like, "Hey, where's your game tonight?" I'm like, "Newton." He's like, Newton, and I was like, I'm sorry, Newton. Like, I don't know. Is that a thing? Do you guys notice that?
Long O's. So usually when you say it fast, like you say like Newton.
Yeah.
So like it depends. So like you're a reporter, right? You're a journalist, so you want to enunciate correctly,
right?
I think mainly the people from Newton just say Newton.
Sure.
But I'm a military journalist as well, Calyn. So I came out here to Fort Meade, Maryland, and learned how to be a journalist from a military point of view, doing photog stuff and writing and whatnot. And so, like, if I'm saying it in a story, I will say Newton. But like just in casual conversation, it's just Newton.
Okay.
It's kind of weird.
Glad you cleared that up. So wait, public affairs, or what's the term?
So it used to be called public affairs specialist.
Yes.
And we have now transitioned to mass communications specialist. So we learn a variety of things to include podcasting, radio, on-camera stuff, journalism, photography. It's kind of all inclusive now that they kind of consolidated all of our training more recently. So it's kind of interesting to do it on the military side and get paid for it. So it's pretty rad.
Oh, for sure. My dad always tried to like recruit me to do that, but I just never took that bait. I knew I was going to do this, but he's like, you should be getting like the benefits of it. But here we are.
I think what it is, Calyn, is he didn't want to pay for your college.
Maybe that. I know, but my brother got all the GI. Yeah, no joke. My brother got like half of it's called the GI, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we had to split that, but here we are, still paying those student loans.
I remember my dad once said, because I told him I was going to go to Iowa State, and he really wanted me to stay closer, and he's like, "Well, why don't you try to go to Drake?" And I was like, "Dad, have you looked at the prices of Drake?" And he's like, "Well, no." And so we looked it up, and he's like, "Yeah, I think Ames is a good place for you." He said, "That sounds great." So,
oh my gosh.
So why journalism? What made you choose journalism?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, my cousin Zach served overseas in Afghanistan, and he was actually injured by an IED. He ended up being okay, but he had a hero's homecoming at the Waterloo airport, and as a family, we went to go welcome him home. And it was my mom who noticed that a reporter was there. You know, she had a camera and was getting video and interviewing my aunt and uncle and just kind of gathering the story of the day. So she's like pointed her out and said, "Wow, she looks like she has a pretty cool job." And I'm like, "Yeah, she does." So I was just kind of watching her do her thing. And then as a family that evening, we went home and watched the story on the news. And I think that just when it really clicked with me that wow, it'd be really cool to tell stories for a living. So that's kind of how that seed got planted. And so I was a freshman, sophomore in high school at that point, and then just kind of stuck with me of like, okay, that's what I wanted to do. So that's why I chose Wartburg to go, because they have a really good broadcast journalism program, could get experience right away with their on-campus television studio and station, and I could start right away as a freshman, and not like if I went to a state school, like, okay, you don't get to do your major classes
Right.
until junior or senior year. So
Sure.
I figured out that's what I wanted to do, and I liked it, and I got internships from there and got the experience. And it's a job where you learn something new every day, meet someone new, experience something new. It's like really a backstage pass to life. So I just feel really privileged and honored to tell people stories, because you don't realize like how big of an impact that storytelling can really have.
Absolutely.
What?
I've got a couple questions, but Drew, you
Yeah.
go ahead first,
Well,
because
I just
I've
want-
got a couple one.
I just wanted to ask Calyn what her favorite part of Waverly, the town itself, was during your college years. What did you like about Waverly?
It was really welcoming. So I'm a really indecisive person, but like my on-campus visit to Wartburg, I knew right away this is where I wanted to go. And like even back to the price tag, my dad was like, "Of course you do." Like, but it was really, I don't know. I just really loved the community aspect of it. It was really warm and welcoming. I have family who live up in Northeast Iowa, so I felt like I was going more towards them versus away. So, grandma could help me with a load of laundry or two every now and then, or go get a home cooked meal. So I just really fell in love with the campus and fell in love with the Waverly community. And there is just such that piece of nostalgia when I go back to visit. I have a couple friends who still live in the area, so it's always fun to go back. And homecoming, was it just last fall? It was my 5-year reunion since I graduated, and I'm just like, what? I just feel like I graduated. So it's going fast for sure.
So 5 years, that puts you at 2018. So you chose to become a journalist at a time that, and we tend not to get too political on this podcast, but the history does show that, during that administration and that time, journalists were not necessarily held in a certain regard that they were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. So was that difficult? Did that affect your decision? I would say that it's fairly brave to do that. I would say the same thing when it comes to teachers and doctors and nurses, and police officers as well. I mean, they're some are vilified by certain people or whatever. And we've had this conversation with Elias, who when he was on, and Dave Price, and things like that. So you being a young journalism, just getting into it, what were your feelings about that kind of stuff when that was happening?
I don't really think I thought about it, to be honest. I think I just knew I wanted to do it, but it's really a job that you learn as you go, and you learn with the experience piece. And you do learn like, oh, you're not always going to be liked based on like the stories you tell. And like it can ruffle feathers. But then it's like your job to be unbiased and try to tell the story in an equal and fair light. But I also think like the role, or not maybe the role, but just journalism in and of itself has just changed in like the past decade. Because like when I grew up watching news, it was just such appointment television. Like my family always sat down to dinner and the news was on Channel 13. But now it's not really like that. So I'm interested to see, selfishly, and also just because like what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years for journalism, because people don't really watch TV anymore, and it is all social media and it is all digital and online. So I think that's changed a lot of it too. And also when you just mentioned like the political climate of people might not really have like a trust in the media, which is just really sad because it used to not really be like that.
We got a question from a viewer, Dave Larson. Says, what one story have you covered that stands out the most, and is there a story you're most proud of?
Oh gosh, this is always such a tough question because it's like there's a saying that's like you're only as good as your last story. And sometimes just when you do cover so much, you have to be like on that certain day, the expert of that certain topic for that day. And then like you move on to the next thing. But as far as something that stands out, I think just because it's like the most recent was probably sharing my own health journey.
Sure.
That was a really standout because it was really surreal to have like the camera flipped. I was used to be the interviewer, and then I was like the interviewee. So I think I developed like a empathy for people who do share their story because it's not easy.
Right.
And like there is a trust piece because you're really sharing it to the masses. But I guess another, and I'm just spitballing too, another big topic would have been COVID and all the different ways we covered that. That just radically changed everyone's lives too. And so I think that almost really shone a spotlight too on the role of news and journalism because people really turned to us for answers and information, and then they did with that as they wish. But that was also really, and like that was an interesting time too, because when the pandemic first started, I was still in Minnesota, and like we were like working from home, but like still reporting. So at that station, they gave us like desktop computers to take to our like apartments because we were all green reporters, like, and we had our cameras and we would go to the different press conferences or talk to the different doctors or whatever. And then, but sometimes like go live from our apartments. It was just so strange, but I mean, we had a job to do and we had questions and other people had questions. So it was our job to get those answers for sure.
You talked about turning the camera around to yourself, Calyn, and it's kind of what I really enjoyed about what Megan Ruther does on Hello Iowa. I believe you've been on there. I've seen Aaron Kiernan on there several times. I like seeing those stories and you folks being like real people, right? Like you're not just a face behind the camera or in front of the camera telling stories. You guys are also people too, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I hope people like see that because I think in the role of like a journalist, especially a broadcast journalist, when you do have to, I don't want to say like put up a front, but like you have to present yourself in a certain way, or people expect you to look a certain way or sound a certain way or be a certain way. It can be like a little exhausting, or you have to feel like you have to be perfect. And you're not. I mean, we're all human, right? And everyone has things going on behind the scenes that people have no idea about. But also at the end of the day, like you have a job to do and you try to keep your personal life personal and professional and do your job to the best of your ability for sure. But I think I hope people try to see like who I am as a person, and I try to portray that because, and I think one thing about Channel 13 too is with all the talent, like what you see is what you get. I mean, everyone is very genuine and very kind. And like how they are on TV is exactly how they are in the newsroom and exactly how they are like when you see them on the street. So I think that's like one of the things I like most about working at Channel 13 for sure.
Yeah, that's a good group over there. I was just texting Elias a little bit ago because I saw Aaron Kiernan's preview of the Talk About Strive Academy tonight.
Yeah.
And Josh and Jordan, my two stepsons, graduated from that program in May.
Mm-hmm.
So I just did text him. I said, "What a coincidence! The boys had just finished that program." And he texted back, and we had a couple laughs about a few other things. But they're all pretty down to earth. I want to ask you this fun question, and then we're going to take a break, and we'll get into why I'm bringing you on here. But What was your, we interviewed, different sports athletes and whatever, and the famous question is what was your welcome to the NFL moment? What was your welcome to the TV reporter moment?
Is this like something that like bad happened or something that
you can
good
make it whatever you want? You can make it whatever you want. I'm just telling you, you're in this business. Bad is much more fun and much more entertaining. But you choose whatever you want.
I don't even know. That is such a good question. I'm sure once we log off, I'll like be trying to go to bed tonight.
Right.
Like, I should have said this. I don't know. I think like just starting out, or even like when I first started at like Channel 13, like you get nervous and like your heart races and you're like nervous to be on TV because you are. But
Sure.
like, I think once you would kind of really get in your groove, you don't think about that as much.
Yeah.
And it just becomes like more comfortable or second nature. So I don't know if there's like really a moment, but I do think there's like a comfortability that you gain, or
Sure.
just you kind of feel more at home in a way.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not answering this question as good
That's
as
all right. You think about it. Maybe we'll come back to it later. I will tell you that it's funny because I don't know that it was a coming to, moment, but I got interviewed several years ago when Marty Terrell was being on trial and so forth. My father and I were one of his early victims back in the mid-90s. And I had messaged Keith and Andy about it, and Andy called me, and he said, "Can we interview you? I'm going to send a reporter over." I was like, "Yeah, I'm working at Capitol Square. I can meet him, here in an hour." And I walked down there, and this poor reporter was he had to be 21, and he looked like he got rolled out of bed. He had this wrinkled shirt on. And I was like, this poor kid got called like in a hurry, and is like, I felt so bad for him because but he just looked like he pulled his suit coat out of his dirty laundry, and it was just a pure college student. Like, this kid was not prepared for this phone call. So,
oh yeah,
it's kind of funny. So
we've all had those moments, and like we've all gotten those middle of the night breaking news calls, and it's just like, oh man, but it's like someone's got to go, and yeah,
right.
You just like put on whatever's closest and just run out the door, and there you go. But
yeah,
let me think on like the moment.
All right, we'll come back to it. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to get a word from our primary sponsor, Revelton Distilling Company. Check out Revelton down at Osceola, 1400 West Clay Street. Check out their tasting room. Their spirits are, at any retail location. And we're going to have a big event down there on December 9th that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But let's get a quick word, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Calyn about her journey. So,
at Revelton Distilling Company, everyone has become a part of the Revelton family. From the Taylors and their daughter who helped perfect their award-winning gins, to the team who installed Lucy, our 33-foot-tall custom-made still, right down to the local farms that provide our coveted corn, and even the cows on those farms who consume our mash byproduct. Want to see the farm to flask come to life? Now you can tour Lucy and find out where we take Iowa's harvest and transform it into our finest spirits. Choose between a 45-minute tour or find out even more by scheduling a VIP behind-the-scenes tour to get the taste of the full Revelton experience. You can visit them at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, or find all of Revelton's award-winning spirits at any local grocery or spirits retailer.
Oh, such great folks down there. We really appreciate they give us great support, and we look forward to seeing them next month. So, Calyn, I think your story was pretty well documented in the early, and then you did something that I think you should be really proud of, and I'll tell you why. You basically, as you said earlier, turned the camera around and made it about yourself. And I don't know that you know this. I don't know that we've had a conversation about this, but I was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in 2017. In September of that year, I had woke up, passed out a couple times. They found some blood in my system, and they had found a small tumor. And I had went through 6 weeks of chemo, radiation. As a matter of fact, my doctor was Dr. Broker as well. He's such a sweetheart. I will tell you, Drew, you will love this story. The very first time I met Dr. Broker, I was sitting in his room. I had an Iowa State shirt on, and he walked in and he goes, "Iowa State fan?" I said, "Yeah, I graduated from there. Couldn't get into the good school, so you went to a secondary college?" And I said, "That's how we're starting this whole conversation, Doc? Like, that's how we're going to start this?" So, and ever since then, every meeting, every conversation we had was 5 minutes about cancer diagnosis and 25 minutes about the Hawk Cinocycle. So, love him to death. So,
yes.
But when I went through that, I remember several times thinking to myself, I'm going to get emotional. If I get through this, I'm going to make sure everybody knows what people did for me, whether it was my family and my friends, the doctors, and God. So when I saw that you had decided to do that story, I thought, I don't even know you. I'm really proud of that because you have no idea probably how many people you have probably helped.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. So with that, let's talk about how you got diagnosed and what the symptoms were and how you got diagnosed in that first day. Because I remember when I got told, I was in a room and it was just me and my wife, and there was about 30 minutes there where I had to really process a lot of things fairly quickly.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a gut punch when you find out. But it was actually like this time of year, a year ago, is like when this process really all started. I had found a lump in my left breast. I'm really close with my mom, and I was like, what is this? Like, feel this. And she's like, oh yeah, I feel something. You might want to get that checked out. I just moved back like a year prior from Minnesota, so I hadn't really gotten like a primary care physician. Like, I think I had a pediatrician in Norwalk, but like I needed probably to get like a doctor, like one I could go see regularly. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go knock this out. And so met with my primary care physician. She also felt it. And then she said, yeah, we might just want to get an ultrasound. They might biopsy it. At your age, I was 27 at the time. It'll probably be a fibroid. I don't think you have much to worry about. I'm like, okay. So we get that set up. And the radiologist also felt it. They did the ultrasound thing, and we did end up taking a biopsy to it. And it was funny, when I went into that appointment, he almost like gave me the choice. He's like, well, we can wait. I mean, at 27, it'll be a fibroid, or we can just kind of knock it out. It's whatever you want to do. And I asked him, like, well, what do you think? And he said, you know, if you were my wife, mom, grandma, aunt, I would say, let's just get it done. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And I'm obviously really glad I did, but there was a good chance I may have not, because I had like a trip coming up the next month. You know, you put things off, right? But I ended up scheduling the biopsy. And so I got that done on a Monday, November 28th, and it was November 30th, a Wednesday, when I got the call. I worked the morning shift. I'd taken a nap that afternoon. It's like I just kind of gotten up from that nap, and I was a little groggy, and I saw a 515 number come up on my phone. And so I figured, oh, this will just be that phone call. It'll be a quick one. I won't have much, it won't be that big of a deal. So I answered it, and it was a radiologist on the other end of the phone. And he's like, hey, do you have a minute to go over your results? And I was just like, oh no, like, if it wasn't a big deal. And it was like 4 or 5 o'clock. So it's like, end of his day. And, your mind starts racing. I'm like, oh no. And then it was like just those words of, it did end up being invasive ductal carcinoma. And like, you just feel like the wind gets knocked out of you. Cause like, it's just like everything flashes before you, and you just realize like how things are going to change. And like, I had to have him like spell it for me. And it was like just such a whirlwind. And it's like hard to even go back there, because it's just, you think about so much. And like, I remember asking him the question, like, am I going to like die, because like that's what you think right away.
Absolutely.
And he's like, we're gonna get you your doctors and you're gonna fight this. And he was like, it's a common thing. I mean, and people go through it, but like there's a treatment plan and we're gonna get you your appointments. And so like that phone call ended, but then it was like I had to like sit with it for a minute. And then it was hard because then it's like now I had to like tell my parents.
And you were by yourself.
Like
Yeah,
I was in my apartment like this. And so like it was just like a lot, because it's like one thing to get that news, but then it's another thing to like have to tell people. And like you don't want to tell your parents that, because you just, I don't know, you don't want to worry them. And it was like hard for me to even say it, because talk about processing, like you're just hit with this and then you have to like tell someone else, and it's like you don't believe it, like you're in denial or you're in shock. So like I tried calling my mom, but like she didn't answer because she was at the gym. So then I called my dad, and he was still working at the time, and like I could barely get the words out. But then he just came and picked me up, and then he took me to my parents' house, and that's where we met up with my mom. And then they invited over my brother and my sister-in-law, and they have a little son. He was 2 at the time. And so, we just kind of like the family meeting of like, okay, like this is what's going on, but we're going to fight this. And I just kind of also had to like gear up for like work the next day, to get up at like 3 a.m. But I think I wanted it to just be like, I wanted to go to work because I just wanted to feel normal.
Right. Yeah.
So like, it's like really surreal to think like I'm coming up on a year on that. But it's like the initial phone call is like the first gut punch, but then it's like you don't even know what comes next. Like things are about to change, but it's a whirlwind for sure.
Yeah, so it kind of brings me to the idea of how hard it is to deliver bad news, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in my personal family, I remember my old man always complaining that my grandparents wouldn't tell him what was going on with them medically. And now, my dad's treating me the same way of not telling me what's going on with him. And, in some aspects, I have a hard time delivering bad news back up the chain, right? You're in the news industry, so you potentially deliver bad news every day.
Yeah.
And then, those doctors and radio techs and whatnot deliver bad news every day. So I can't imagine dealing with that big of bad news to like, what's next? How are we gonna how are we gonna move forward, right?
Right. Well, it's like interesting you bring that up, because that was just such a theme, I think, within the journey of like, at first, I mean, I told my family and like loved ones, and like that was really tough. But then I really just wanted it to be really private, I think, just because of my job. Like I didn't want anyone to know at first, just because I think I had to like process it. And I just knew it was going to be such a visual disease in like a visual career. So I think I had to come to terms with that, or just deal with that in my own way. But I will say, like, one thing that I found, or that I just really reflected on within my journey, was how like the people I met within the different phases, how they were able to deliver news to me, and like how much that stuck with me. Like Chris mentioned, Dr. Tom Baroker. He was my oncologist as well, and just the way he is able to deliver news and like puts me at ease, because he just made me believe like, okay, we're going to fight this. We're going to get this done. We're going to get you back on track. So like that was huge. My surgeon, Dr. Scott Hamling, was amazing, because he's actually the one I met first before Dr. Broker. And he is the one who went through the treatment plan. And I asked him, like, am I going to lose my hair? And he said, yes. And it's funny because that's when it like hit me.
Yeah.
Like that was the second gut punch for me. And I think probably for a lot of women and maybe men too. Can't really speak on that, but, and then even just like the role of the radiologist, right? They're like the first person you come in contact with.
Yeah.
So it's like they have such a job, like delivering that news like via a phone call. But then I also spoke with the radiologist after the fact. And it was like a full circle moment too, because last October during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I brought in a radiologist to the morning show to talk about mammograms and what people need to keep in mind. And that was like a month before I got my own diagnosis, which I just thought was maybe like a spiritual thing of, okay, it was like preparing me for that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was like an accident. But it was that radiologist, Dr. Jill Westerkamp, who I spoke with again this past October. And I was like, man, you have a hard job, like telling people like their life is forever changed. But she also said, yes, but I also get to tell people that, you know, they have a chance to fight it. And like, there's things we can do. So I think it's all about perspective. And like, that is something you really gain during this journey is perspective and how to go about things for sure.
There are so many avenues that I want to take this conversation just based off of the first answer to your question, because it's so many things I remember. I'll touch base on this when it comes to the doctors and so on. The one thing that struck me was every Monday when I would go into to chemo to get my treatment, the nurses would look at you and they were polite and bubbly and happy, and they knew your name and they knew what you needed, and they, you know, would comfort you and all these things. And about halfway through it dawned on me, there's people that don't make it. And they live and breathe with these guys, with these people. And I have no idea the grief that they're going through, but you wouldn't know it because when I walked into the door, I was the most important person to them, and and it just struck me as amazing, an amazing ability.
Yeah.
The other thing is I look back at the time that I was diagnosed, and I was lucky enough to have my wife with me in the room, and you know we processed it for a little bit, and I remember just looking at her. We had only been married. We got married in 2011. I was diagnosed in 2017. We had met in 2008, 2009. And I remember just looking at her and saying, I don't believe in a God that brought us together that's going to take us away. And that was my mindset. I was not going to let it beat me. And I also remember the first night in the hospital, laying up in the middle of the night, looking and Googling survival rates for esophageal cancer. And I thought to myself, this is a bad fucking idea. Because none of these people are me. And you can go to a dark place pretty quick.
Absolutely. That actually, my radiologist visit, like one of the texts was like, don't Google. Yeah. Like, don't do it because, and she gave me such good advice. She said, because that was even an appointment. Like I found out on the Wednesday and I had to go back on a Friday to do more ultrasounds, or like I got my first mammogram like at 28, and then they found a couple more spots, and I was like, oh my God, I like went from bad to worse, right? So we were checking that out, and I was just having a moment with this tech, and I was just like, I don't know what I did, like I don't know why this is happening, and she's like, hey, you got to just keep moving forward. Like, you can't think about what happened or what you could have done or what you didn't do, because like that doesn't matter anymore. Like you have to think about what's ahead. And so I think that was like the best advice. And she's like, don't Google. And I didn't, because you could really spiral yourself.
Right.
and that's like, because like that can like not put it into perspective, but it's just like, it is the realization that like people don't always survive.
Right.
And like that is hard to think about.
The advice that she gave you moving forward, and that and where you were thinking, why this or whatever. There was a profound moment. I was probably second weekend, and I had found this motivational video on YouTube that I would watch every Monday night after chemo, and it was called "Why Do They Fail?" and it was clips of different speeches and movies and whatever. And as cliche as it sounds, the very first clip of that was from the Rocky Balboa movie, when his dad, when his son was older, and he would say, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. And he said, life can beat you into the street and kick the crap out of you, and you got one of two choices. You can lay there and take the beating, or you can get up and walk. And that's what winners do. And I remember watching that. I mean, this was 6 years ago. I still get emotional. I remember watching that every Monday night and going, I can win, I can win, I can win. And Calyn came upstairs, and it was her senior year in high school. She had all these things that was going to come up, and she came up and she just started bawling. And I was like, what's the matter? And she said, it isn't fair. Why did this happen to you? And I said, we're not doing that. Nope. We're not feeling sorry for ourselves. We're moving forward, and we're going to win. And this is not the year that Dad got cancer. This is the year that you graduate, and that the boys do this, and that Tyler does this. It's not about that. We are not going to let it dictate our lives.
That's always been a hard. I know this isn't a spiritual podcast, Chris, but that's always been one of my biggest things with religion. Right? Is like, why do bad things happen to good people?
Mm-hmm.
And like, people have a hard time giving me appropriate feedback to that question. Right? Like, I don't know. It's just a thing I was thinking about when we were talking about this. So,
Calyn, I'll let you answer that, but I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I think, not that he let it happen, because I don't know that he let it happen. And this is a question that I was going to ask you as well, Calyn. People ask me about that year and say, we'll make a comment that goes, man, that year must have been a terrible year for you in your life. And I say, you know what? I look back at it as my best year, because I found out who loved me. I found out how many friends I had. I found out how many people I touched, and I found out how strong I was.
Yeah.
So my question to you, Calyn, in terms of that is what's a positive that you took out of this experience?
I think like a lot of the reasons you just said is like, it transforms you as a person, and you do find out like who your friends are, and you become stronger. And even to answer, what Drew was mentioning too, I think when you go through something like this, you can either lose your faith or it can get stronger. And I'm really grateful mine did get stronger. There are many times that like at the beginning, me and my mom would just be sitting in church, and just like, we felt like they were speaking right to us. Like, it was right around Christmas. And like, I'll never forget, one of the sermons was like, are you feeling like a Grinch this Christmas, or are you feeling like Buddy the Elf? And it's like, no matter where you're at, I mean, Jesus is here for you. Like, sorry if this isn't a spiritual podcast, but like, it just makes it feel like you're not alone. And like, you may not understand like the why of why you're going through it, or why me. Like, you naturally have that question, right? Like, why am I going through this? Or like, why does my family have to deal with this? But then I think I just tried to like flip that into like my why. And I think there was a reason why I did get this as a journalist, because if like I could help someone, then like that is my why, and like that's my reason to share. And like it's not a club you want to be a part of, but you do meet some of the best people. And like I'm so thankful for like our medical personnel that we have in the metro. And I'm just really thankful that I felt so cared for and supported. And so I guess, yeah, to answer your question, like I'm thankful for how it changed me as a person. Like, do I wish I didn't have to go through this? Absolutely. But I also know there's a lot more that I gained than from what I lost.
Yeah, that's probably the best perspective way to say it. I like I said, I've said before that it was my, and I also felt like I didn't want to let anybody down during it either. All these people were helping me, and all these people were doing these things, and people were bringing meals, and people were taking care of the kids when we were at an appointment, and all those things. And I felt, if these guys are doing all this stuff, then I owe it to them to not feel sorry for myself and not to take a break. I prided myself on going in and working every day as best as I could and things like that, and making sure that my coworkers didn't have to pick up the slack and things like that. And that was a badge of honor for me to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I would tell Caitlin and my family, I was like, yeah, I mean, we're going to make it. That doesn't mean that the next few months aren't going to suck, because they do. But spirituality, I mean, kind of the same thing, Calyn. I can remember every day I would go in for radiation. I had to go in every day, and I had to lay on the on the thing, and they would measure the, they'd point the thing, and the radiation probably took 15 minutes. But I remember always, every day, I said a Hail Mary, I said a Glory Be, and I asked God to help the doctors and nurses do what they needed to do. And I said, if you get me out of this, I'll always tell everybody what you did for me. So it's a spiritual thing. I look back at some friends that I've had that haven't made it, and you sometimes wonder why they didn't and I did. But Drew, if you start asking those types of questions like you did, you'll drive yourself crazy, because you're never going to get the answer you're never going to get the answer that you want. I mean, I could ask God all the time why the Bears lost to the Colts in that Super Bowl, but I mean, that's a whole nother story.
I mean, that don't matter. Come on.
I know, right? That's in the grand scheme of things. Jason said God only gives the trials to the ones that share the struggles with. That's absolutely right. So, Calyn, we're gonna we usually do a Wintrust. We're gonna switch gears again. We're gonna talk about some fun, happy stuff, and then we'll get you out of here because I know you got to get up in the morning.
Okay.
But we usually ask a Wintrust mortgage question of the day. So Drew's going to ask you this question. We're going to play a break for Wintrust, and then that'll give you time to think of your answer. How about that? Okay.
Okay.
All right, Drew, go ahead.
All right, Calyn. So we're just around the corner from Veterans Day, and we're going to tie this all back in. So as a service member and as a military brat, as you call yourself in your bio, I would like to know what branch of service you would select to join if you could or wanted to, and why, and also what military occupation would you choose in that branch of service?
Okay.
Okay, so we'll get a word from Kyle, and then we'll come back with your answer, okay?
Okay.
Are you in the market for a new house and unsure of the mortgage process? Want to know that you have someone looking out for you? Kyle Lehman from Wintrust Mortgage is a down-to-earth, knowledgeable lender who can be there for you in your corner. He can work with you in any of the 50 states and is just what you need to expand your home search. Kyle will work with you through the entire process with little to no work from you. Take the worry of the mortgage process out of the equation so that you can focus on looking for your dream home. Contact Kyle at www.wintrust.com/Kyle-Lehman or call him at 515-473-0546.
All right, Drew, why don't you ask that question one more time, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so right around the corner again from Veterans Day, asked Calyn what military branch of service she would join if she could or wanted to, and why, and what military occupation she would choose to do in that service. I'm excited about this since your dad was Air Guard. I'm actually Army National Guard out here in the DC area. So I'm really excited to hear this answer.
I think I just got to make my dad proud and go with Air Force, Air National Guard, and probably do the public affairs specialist, because I think it's just such a cool role, and like the military would have so many cool stories to tell. And even like in my role at Channel 13, I have gotten to go on base to tell some of those stories, and there's such an interest for it, and it's cool to pull back the curtain on that. And just even specifically with the 132nd Wing, like that's right in people's backyards. And I think people really miss the days when those F-16 jets were up in the skies above us. So there's a bit of nostalgia there, but I think I'd have to do my dad proud and go there.
All right, I can handle that. That's fine. It's still the Guard, so that
yeah, for sure.
There you go. Okay, we're gonna finish up with our last segment. So, Calyn, the story on this last segment is Steph Copley, who is a fairly popular Cyclone Twitter fan.
I follow her. Yeah,
and has her own podcast on the Cyclone Fanatic Network. Came on last year, and I jokingly, I don't know how accurate this is, but I jokingly say that Stephanie told Tim to shut the fuck up so she could get her point in. And we thought it was so funny that we've now established an STFU segment where in the process, we decided to make a charitable donation to the Young Women's Resource Center every time that we have this segment. So how this works is I'm going to play a quick clip from Steph to invite people to donate to the Young Women's Resource Center. And then Drew and I have to be quiet, and you get to say whatever you want without us interrupting. And if that means you want to shit talk the Hawkeyes, that's fine with me. Whatever you want to do. I know. Look at the panic on your face. Look at the panic on her face. You get carte blanche. You can say whatever you want. So I'm gonna play this quick ad and then we'll come back.
About sports? Does it have to be about sports?
You can be whatever you want. You want to talk bad about Elias Johnson? You can do that too.
No, I don't do that.
Hey everybody, it's Steph Copley, the woman behind the STFU segment on the Old Man Strength podcast. When I told the guys I wanted to sponsor this segment, they recommended that I make a charitable donation instead, so that's what I did. I chose the Young Women's Resource Center in Des Moines, Iowa. They're a nonprofit that supports, educates, and advocates for girls and young women ages 10 to 24. Their whole goal is to make sure that these young women become strong, self-confident, and successful. And if you know me at all, you know that aligns with my goals as well. If you're interested and would like to donate, check them out at ywrc.org and donate today. And remember, don't forget to STFU and listen every once in a while. Thanks.
All right. And such a good organization, and we'll touch base on the event that we're going to have. But all right, Calyn, Drew and I have to be quiet. You can say whatever you want. We can't interrupt.
Okay. Well, I think I just have to really, take some time to talk about in the theme of STFU and listen to your body. We're just coming out of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And if something doesn't feel right, please go get it checked out. That's what saves lives. And that's what saved my life. The reason that I shared my story was to not be superior, but to have solidarity, because this is something that a lot of people do deal with. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's young women who deal with it. And that can be really life-changing and challenging. But with that said, I just want to say thank you to all the people in my corner who have helped me through this journey and are still helping me. I think that's not talked about enough, is that once you're done with treatment or done with the surgery piece, there's still a lot of trials and challenges you have to go through as a survivor in order to thrive, whether that be physically getting through those surgery effects and impacts, or even mental health wise. Speak up if something doesn't feel right there too. And don't be afraid to go talk to someone, because we were not made to have to go through something like that. It's very unnatural, and there's nothing wrong with seeking professional help to go speak with someone to be about what you're feeling. or just to lay things out. So I'm really rattling things off. I want to thank all my doctors and healthcare providers. That's another reason I really wanted to do a series during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, is just to shine a light on the people who have helped me in my journey, and who have helped so many other women in the metro. Dr. Broker, Dr. Hamling, Dr. Deming with Above and Beyond Cancer, Jack Moreland with Studio 409, helping women get a wig and feel more like themselves. There's just so many different players in your journey as a breast cancer patient and breast cancer survivor. And it's not one you go through alone. And I'm really thankful for that. And I'm just thankful for everyone, my parents, my family, my friends, and above all, like, I wouldn't be here without God. So that's I think what I wanted to say.
Perfect. We got a couple comments. Denny wants to thank you for sharing your story. You're a strong person and helped others with it. And Dave says Norwalk's graduated Superman, Aquaman, and now Wonder Woman. Way to go, Calyn. So,
Thanks, David.
Yeah. So, speaking of STFU, we here at Three Beards Media are going to have a big celebration at Revelton Distilling Company on December 9th. And we are going to have a live recording of our podcast. And we are going to have an auction there and raise money for the Young Women's Resource Center. We've got some different stuff that we're going to auction off through that. So for you listeners, we would love for you guys to come down. It's December 9th from 12 to 2 p.m. on a Saturday. The majority of our pods are going to come. I don't have enough budget to fly Drew in, so we'll just Zoom him right in. But we'd love to invite everybody out there. Calyn, of course, you were invited. We would love to have you come down. So I'll just wrap up with this. I want to give another shout out for Dr. Broker. You said earlier in the podcast that he was so positive, and he would, when you talk to him, you would not know, how bad it would be or whatever. And two things. I remember one time he asked me, he said, how are you doing, Chris? And I said, well, why don't you tell me how I'm doing, Doc? And he said, if I could write a story of somebody being able to respond to treatment, I couldn't write it as good as you're doing. So that really made me feel good. And then fast forward all the way to the end, he cleared me and he said, you don't have to come back here anymore. I'm sick of looking at you. You know how he is.
Yes, I love it.
And he said, and he goes, now I'm going to tell you something. When you walked out of here that first day, I looked at my assistant and said, I give him a 5% chance of surviving. And you made it.
Wow.
But the fact that he never relayed that until afterwards, it's hard to process sometimes.
For sure.
But I have such a high regard for him. So shout out Dr. Broker. I'm sure he's listening.
He's helped so many people, and I'm so happy I got to interview him because he puts it into perspective of he gets to see people to their core. Like people aren't worried about, paying their mortgage or the car. Like,
right.
You're fighting for your life. And like, he told me like, what a privilege I get to do what I do. But to echo what you said, yeah, he makes you feel like you're the only person in the room, that you can do this. He can be tough because he's like, you're going to work, kid. You're not going to like it. But
right.
But I'm so thankful he did that, because mental health wise, I would have went crazy if I didn't work during chemo. But he's helped so many people, and he's saved so many lives for sure.
Yeah, he has. All right, Drew, you got anything else before we let her go to bed? Because she's got an early morning. She's got like teacher hours. That's like my wife. She texted me half an hour ago. She's like, I'm going to go to bed. I'm like, it's 7:30. She's like, I've had a long day. So she teaches elementary school. So
I just want to thank her for her time and her story, and tell your dad I am thankful for his service, please.
I will. Thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
I don't know. Maybe I've ran into him around town. I just don't know what he looks like.
He's at the gas stations a lot. He's drinking a Diet Pepsi if you've seen him.
Awesome.
That's nice. All right. Calyn, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so much. Check out all the other podcasts on the Three Beards Media Network. Drew and his partner Andrew do Hawk's Eye View around 6 p.m. on Thursday nights, and then do a quick pod reaction to the high-powered firing Brian Ferentz offense and basketball. I'm sure they'll do a reaction pod at 1 o'clock in the morning tonight when the Iowa basketball team's over. Ball Don't Lie, our gambling podcast with Teddy and Justin are on Thursday afternoons at 3 o'clock. So check out the rotation, and we appreciate it. And with that, we are...